You're lying awake at 2 in the morning, replaying that moment from today when you said something awkward in front of everyone. Your stomach twists as you imagine what they must be thinking about you right now. The worst part, they've probably already forgotten, moved on with their lives, but you're still trapped in this mental prison where their opinions control your happiness, your confidence, and your peace of mind. What if I told you that this constant anxiety about other people's judgment isn't a personality flaw, it's a bug in your psychological software that you can actually fix? Today, we're diving into the neuroscience of social anxiety, what ancient Stoic philosophers discovered about freedom from judgment, and the exact practices that will help you build unshakable self-confidence from the inside out. By the end of this video, you'll understand why caring what people think is destroying your life, and more importantly, how to finally break free the prison of other people's opinions. Why this destroys your life. You don't pursue the career you actually want because someone might think it's impractical. You don't express your real thoughts because someone might judge you. You don't dress how you want, speak how you want, or live how you want because somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a jury of invisible critics whose approval you're desperately seeking. Your happiness becomes completely dependent on variables you cannot control: other people's moods, biases, and arbitrary standards. One critical comment can destroy your entire week, while a compliment gives you a temporary high that fades within hours. Here's what makes this particularly cruel. The people whose opinions you're obsessing over are too busy worrying about what you think of them to actually be judging you nearly as much as you imagine. You think you're center stage in everyone's mind, but the truth is, you're barely a background character in their daily mental drama. The neuroscience. Why your brain does this. So why does your brain torture you with social anxiety if other people aren't even paying that much attention? Let's talk about the evolutionary psychology behind this mental trap. 10,000 years ago, being rejected by your tribe meant death. You couldn't survive alone in a hostile environment. Your brain evolved an extremely sensitive social threat detection system designed to keep you accepted by the group at all costs, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline, the same stress hormones released when facing a actual life-threatening situation. This is why a negative comment on social media can trigger the same physiological response as being chased by a predator, even though rationally you know one is harmless and the other is deadly. The problem is that this ancient survival mechanism is completely mismatched to modern life. You won't die if someone thinks your presentation was boring or your outfit is weird, but your amygdala hasn't received that software update. It's still running on prehistoric code that treats social disapproval as a survival emergency. The trap deepens when you understand dopamine's role in this cycle. Every time you receive external validation, on social media, a compliment, someone's approval, your brain releases dopamine, the pleasure and motivation neurotransmitter. This creates an addictive feedback loop where you become psychologically dependent on external validation for your sense of self. You're essentially training your brain that happiness and confidence come from outside yourself, which means you'll never feel secure because you can't control other people's reactions. The Stoic solution: ancient wisdom on freedom. Now let's look at what philosophers figured out about this problem 2,000 years ago, long before we had brain scanners and psychology research. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, dealt with literally millions of people having opinions about his every decision. Here's what he wrote in his private journal. Meditations. You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. The Stoics understood something profound. There are exactly two categories of things in life: things within your control and things outside your control. Other people's opinions fall squarely in the second category. You have zero control over what someone thinks about you, which means spending emotional energy worrying about it is literally insane. You're trying to control the uncontrollable, which is the definition of suffering. Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher, took this even further. He taught his students, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Think about how radical that statement is. He's saying that your path to genuine confidence requires you to completely let go of managing other people's perceptions. The freedom to be yourself only comes when you're willing to be misunderstood, criticized, and judged, and you're okay with it. This wasn't just abstract philosophy for the Stoics. It was a daily practice. They would intentionally do things that invited minor social disapproval just to train themselves not to care. Seneca, a wealthy advisor to the Roman emperor, would occasionally dress in cheap clothing and eat simple food in public, specifically to practice being comfortable with people thinking less of him. This is what he called voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing small embarrassments to build immunity to judgment. Buddhist philosophy offers a complementary perspective through the concept of detachment. The Buddha taught that attachment to others' opinions is one of the primary sources of suffering. When you need external validation to feel worthy, you've handed control of your inner peace to random people who are themselves confused, biased, and struggling. Your happiness becomes like a boat tossed by waves, completely at the mercy of external circumstances you cannot control. The confidence paradox, why seeking approval destroys it. Here's the cruel paradox at the heart of social anxiety. The more you try to get people to like you and approve of you, the less confident you become, and ironically, the less likable you appear to others. Let me explain the psychology and philosophy behind this paradox. When your behavior is motivated by seeking approval, you're fundamentally communicating to yourself and others that you don't believe you're inherently worthy, who need their validation to become worthy. This creates what psychologists call an external locus of control. Your sense of self-worth is controlled by forces outside yourself. Every interaction becomes a test you might fail. Every conversation carries the weight of, am I being impressive enough? This anxiety is visible in your body language, your hesitant speech, your apologetic demeanor. People can sense often unconsciously that you're performing for their approval rather than being authentic. And this actually makes you less attractive, less trustworthy, and less confident. True confidence, the kind that makes people naturally respect you, comes from what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This is when your sense of self-worth comes from living according to your values, pursuing you or goals, and being aligned with your authentic self, regardless of external feedback. This is what the Stoics meant by living in accordance with nature, not nature as in trees and rivers, but your own true nature, your authentic character beneath the social masks. The philosophy of existentialism, particularly Jean-Paul Sartre's work, addresses this directly. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, meaning we have the terrifying responsibility to create our own meaning and values, rather than accepting society's script. Most people run from this freedom into bad faith, living according to what others expect rather than what they authentically value. The anxiety you feel about judgment is actually, according to Sartre, anxiety about your own freedom, the frightening possibility that you could choose to live differently. So how do you actually make this shift from external validation to internal confidence? This isn't about positive affirmations or pretending you don't care when you secretly do. This is about rewiring the actual neural pathways and philosophical frameworks that govern yourself. Practice 1. The Stoic morning preparation. Every morning, before you check your phone or engage with the world, spend 5 minutes on what the Stoics called premeditio malorum negative visualization. Imagine the worst social judgment scenarios that might happen today. Someone might criticize your work. Someone might not laugh at your joke. Someone might think you look stupid. Now imagine yourself handling it with complete indifferencing the criticism, acknowledging it, and moving forward unchanged in your sense of self. You're training your amygdala that social disapproval is not a survival threat. Practice 2. The so what technique. When you catch yourself spiraling into anxiety about someone's opinion, ask yourself 3 questions. First, so what if they think that about me? Second, how does their opinion actually affect my life in any concrete way? Third, am I living according to my values, or am I trying to live according to their expectations? This breaks the automatic fear response and engages your rational prefrontal cortex. Most of the time, you'll realize their opinion has 0 actual impact on anything that matters. Practice 3. Values, clarity, exercise. You cannot build internal confidence if you don't know what you internally value. Take 30 minutes this week to write down your core values. Not what you think you should value. Not what your parents or society says you should value, but what you actually care about deeply. Is it creativity? Is it honesty? Is it growth? Is it service? Once you know your North Star, you can evaluate your choices and behaviors against YOUR standards rather than imagined external judgment. This is the foundation of what Marcus Aurelius called living according to reason. Practice 4. Voluntary discomfort training. Following Seneca's example, intentionally do small things that invite minor social disapproval, or something slightly unconventional. Express an unpopular opinion in a low-stakes conversation. Order something different at a restaurant you always go to. These micro-embarrassments train your nervous system that social disapproval is not dangerous. You're literally doing exposure therapy on yourself, building psychological immunity to judgment one small risk at a time. Practice 5. The Evening Stoic Review. Before bed, journal on 3 questions the Stoics used for self-examination. What did I do today that was aligned with my values, regardless of others' approval? When did I let fear of judgment stop me from being authentic? What would I do differently tomorrow if I truly didn't care what people thought? This isn't about beating yourself up, it's about building self-awareness and consciously choosing who you want to be tomorrow. Practice 6. The Buddhist Detachment Meditation. Once a day, spend 5 minutes practicing metacognitive awareness of your approval-seeking thoughts. When you notice yourself thinking, "What will they think of me?" don't fight the thought, just label Italiano. This is approval-seeking. This is fear of judgment. By observing the thought, rather than being consumed by it, you create what Buddhists call the space between stimulus and response. The freedom to choose whether to follow that anxious thought or let it pass like a cloud across the sky. The deeper truth. What this is really about. Here's something most advice about confidence misses entirely. Chronic anxiety about others' opinions is usually a symptom of a deeper problem. You don't know who you are outside of other people's validation. If you removed everyone's opinions about you, if you had no feedback from the external world, would you know what you valued? Would you know what you wanted? Would you know who you were? Most people have spent so much of their lives performing for approval that they've lost touch with their authentic self entirely. The anxiety isn't really about what they'll think it's about. The terrifying possibility that if you stop performing, you'll discover you don't know who you are underneath a mask. This is what Carl Jung called living from the persona rather than the true self. You've become so identified with the role you play for others that you've forgotten there's a real person underneath. This is why building genuine confidence requires more than techniques and practices. It requires philosophical courage. The courage to ask, who am I? Really? The courage to discover that maybe you don't like what your parents wanted you to study. Maybe you don't believe what your community expects you to believe. Maybe you want something completely different from what would make you look successful to others. This is the examined life. Socrates talked about the willingness to question everything, including the version of yourself you've constructed to earn approval. Your freedom, the life on the other side. Imagine what your life would look like if you genuinely didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. You'd speak honestly without rehearsing your words. You'd make decisions based on your values, not on managing perceptions. You'd pursue the work that actually matters to you, not the work that looks impressive. You'd form relationships with people who appreciate your authentic self, not connections based on a performance. This isn't about becoming arrogant or dismissive of all feedback. Wisdom is knowing the difference between useful feedback from people you respect and random judgment from people projecting their own fears onto you. The Stoics didn't say, never listen to anyone. They said, don't let anyone else's opinion determine your worth. There's a profound difference. True confidence, real happiness, genuine peace of mind, these don't come from finally getting everyone to approve of you. They come from approving of yourself based on whether you're living according to your examined values. They come from the philosophical freedom of knowing that you cannot control what anyone thinks, so you might as well be yourself completely. They come from the psychological liberation of breaking your dopamine addiction to external validation and building self-worth from internal alignment called to action. So here's your challenge for the next 7 days. Pick one of the practices from this video, just one. Maybe it's the morning Stoic preparation. Maybe it's the so what? Technique. Maybe it's one small act of voluntary discomfort per day. Practice it consistently for 7 days. You're not trying to transform overnight. You're building new neural pathways, new philosophical frameworks, new habits of thought that will compound over months and years. If this video gave you a different perspective on confidence and freedom from judgment, subscribe to The Examined Mind for more content where psychology, philosophy, and practical self-improvement converge. Drop a comment telling me which practice you're committing to this week. The community accountability actually helps. Next week, we're examining why chasing happiness keeps you miserable, and what the Stoics and modern psychology agree actually creates lasting contentment. Thanks for examining your mind with me. Now go practice being free.